Thalian Hall writing the check for $7,000, man. And that was my very first screening.
This is Real Perspective, and I'm your host, Eli Yetter-Bowman. On this show, I interview various professional storytellers, often in the documentary space like myself, and we explore the craft of storytelling. Guests share their honest perspectives, from past mistakes to tips for succeeding and other genuine insights on how we can make a living creatively. This show includes no advertisers to keep things more authentic. If you want to support us, help us out, we do offer a variety of consulting services for filmmakers, storytellers, businesses, and other groups, on top of producing documentaries. Shoot us a message at etherealfilms.org if you want to learn more. And now, it's time for the show. Today's guest is Chris, a documentary filmmaker. I met him through the Southern Documentary Fund, where he also serves as the artistic director. We talk about how he broke into the industry, how his failed film actually led to his success, and the unique world of screening documentary films.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Everett. I'm the artistic director at the Southern Documentary Fund. I'm also a documentary director, producer, and curator. I also have my own festival called the Three Chambers Festival as well, which is a fusion of hip hop, martial arts, and anime culture, and just all around creative person.
Let's just start at the beginning for your work as a documentary filmmaker. How did you get involved in documentary? Take me to the start. What was that journey like for you?
Well, how I got into documentary, I think it was really in film, being in front of the camera. Back in the day, I was about 100 pounds lighter. And so my introduction to film in general was doing modeling and acting. So doing a lot of commercial work, student film projects, indie projects. So that's how I kind of got my feet wet into this whole film game. And then it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta, I would say around 2007, is when I kind of got an interest of wanting to do a documentary. I felt like doing a documentary was a little easier than trying to do a narrative project. And then I just loved history and culture, especially Black history and Black culture. And so I decided to do my very first film, which was a film based in my hometown on the Laurinburg Institute. And the Laurinburg Institute is a historical Black boarding and day school, been around since 1904. I think the school closed down maybe about 15 years ago. It's been the same family for 3 generations. My grandfather went to school there. Godfather was the alumni president for years. So I knew all about this school's history, and no one had ever did a documentary on it. So I said, let me try it out. I totally failed at it. I didn't finish it. And so I decided to maybe turn it into like an oral history project, because the school didn't really have an archive. And I had collected all this archival material over the years and did all these interviews. So I pretty much transformed the documentary idea into just doing it as like an oral history project to give to the school just for their own archival purposes. But it's funny, man, because later down the road, a lady who's writing a book on the Laurinburg Institute, she actually reached out to me last year, said, "Hey, Chris, I heard you the guy with all this archival material. I'm doing a book on the Laurinburg Institute, and I would love to license some of your stuff." And so we did that, and that book just came out a couple of months ago. And so even though I didn't finish that documentary, the materials and all the research and things that I did for the film ended up coming into good use down the road. And so that was really my first introduction into doing the documentary, into doing documentary work, was not finishing my first documentary. So that was kind of like my hard lesson, man. I learned a lot of things doing that first film. And then the next film was the documentary Wilmington on Fire.
I love how the arc of that story of challenges, basically like failure, right, as you were saying, like also had such a beautiful full circle of like, actually sometimes we think that we fail or we make mistakes or we don't meet our own goals, but then there's still something good that's going to come out of it, right? I mean, you essentially just gave us more evidence that like it's not necessarily a waste of time just because something didn't come out the way that you wanted to, which I feel like is a lesson for every doc filmmaker, I mean, or just really any kind of creatively ambitious person, right? It's like, it's really easy to bite off more than you can chew, and then just be like, oh, geez. So I really appreciate how you shared that. I resonate with the like coming from almost like acting or wanted to be in front of the camera. I was like a stage actor a lot actually when I was in middle and high school. And one of the things when I moved to Wilmington, because I moved there in about middle school, and my parents were always supportive of do whatever you want. And like to me, visual storytelling, performance has always been near and dear to my heart. Obviously with Thalia and Hall, there's a pretty big acting community in Wilmington. And I've always loved that. So it's interesting to hear that you've had sort of a similar, like, well, you start, maybe with an interest in film, wanting to be in front of the camera. And it's easy, I think, to be enticed by multiple parts of it. Well, what if I'm behind the camera, operating the story structures? But I'd like to hear more about your personal transition into more of that role as a producer and a filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, like I said, doing the whole acting thing and being involved in several independent projects, I got to just see how they made films, and it really caught my interest of seeing how the director, what they do, and to produce it. And also as an independent person, because when you're doing it independently, you're doing three to four jobs. A lot of times you're the director and the producer, you're the caterer, you're the PA, you're getting coffee, you're doing all this stuff, man. And so it really showed that it takes multiple hats, especially when you're working with limited budgets. So seeing the budget limitations, just being in some of these films, but also, even though we had these budget limitations, we still made some impactful work. And I say, you know what, I think I can do the same with documentary. Yeah, I might not get all this money to produce these projects, but I think we can have a great impact in what we're trying to do. And so just seeing other independent producers and directors do their thing while I'm on set, in front of the camera, really just motivated me to want to do this even more. And also just learning by doing. I think that's the key thing, even when you have filmmakers that are in school and they reach out to me all the time. I say, man, the only way you're going to learn is really by doing it. And don't worry about making mistakes. You're going to mess up. Even the top greats, I heard Spike Lee say this one time. He can't even watch his first couple of early movies that he made, like She's Gotta Have It, Do the Right Thing. And these films are pretty much considered classics in cinema. And he said he can't even watch them because he sees the mistakes that he made in them. And, this is like 30, 40 years ago, and so even the legends make mistakes, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them and just continue to get better and better as you continue to make films, especially in documentary.
100%. I completely agree. I don't know. I've like shifted when I'm offering advice to other filmmakers. I'm like, it's not only that you want to be okay with mistakes, but it's almost like you have to make the mistake because that's how you're going to learn, right? Is like embrace the failure or embrace the imperfection. But gosh, that cuts deep. You can't even watch early stuff. I'm like, I feel the same way. Every time I got to go to my own film screening, I'm like, oh, I've already seen this. I'm going to see that same transition that I didn't like, or that little bit of audio that no one notices, but you do, that you're like, oh, I could have been.
Wilmington on Fire, man. I can't watch it in front of people because I'm like, I cringe. Everyone loves it and heralds it as this great documentary. I'm like, man, all the mistakes throughout this thing, I'm embarrassed.
I honestly, I feel like there should be an additional budget item for any screening where you need the filmmaker just to like help us get through emotionally of having to rewatch our own thing. That I'm just like, man, you have no idea how hard this is. But just to build off of your earlier point too, I mean, I think this is, I share in this experience of, I once worked on a pretty big movie set in just outside of Wilmington. It was in Southport. This is an unnecessary detail, but it was a huge movie. It was like a massive Hollywood film that I was like brought in as just like a small little bit role, but it was cool. I got to see the experience of a like 150 person movie set. And yeah, I mean, just like you were saying, same experience, same takeaway of just like, essentially I was watching all these people work and all these different layers of experience and all the different roles. To be quite honest, most of what I thought was like, man, this seems like a huge waste of money. Why are there so many people here? I feel like you could do this with like 5 people. And yeah, but I think those experiences are helpful because that is true. I mean, in documentary, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of you go from having way too many people to you have one person doing 9 jobs, But I think that's a great way to learn. You're completely correct. The best way to learn is simply by doing and screwing up, and then you're a little bit better next time. Can you talk to me a little bit more about Wilmington on Fire and what the timeline was like when you transitioned from the not necessarily delivering on your Laurenberg Institute documentary, but then ultimately it was 2015, I believe, was the release of the Wilmington on Fire documentary?
Yep. So pretty much doing the Laurenberg Institute documentary and doing research, found out that the town of Laurenberg had a connection to the 1898 massacre. And so that's what kind of led me to say, you know what, since I didn't complete this film, I totally bombed on it, let me explore this 1898 project and idea. And so I decided to do some research. I think the research started in 2010, and I was still living in Atlanta at the time. And so I was going back and forth maybe like every other weekend to North Carolina, doing research, coming back to Atlanta. And then something happened, man. I ended up getting laid off from my job. They kind of downsized. And then I had to make a decision. I said, hey, I just started this cool idea that's in development called Wilmington on Fire that really no one's ever really heard of, this racial massacre. And so I decided to move back to North Carolina and leave Georgia behind and pursue this. And I had to convince my grandparents, because they lived in Laurenberg still, hey, I just got laid off. I have no job. I'm getting unemployment, but I came up with this idea to do this documentary film. Can I stay at y'all's house while I do it? And they're just looking at me like I'm crazy. They didn't really know what a documentary was. They're like, okay, what are you doing? And so I had to really get through that type of thing, man, of not really having that full support, from family, and still try to stay focused. Because a lot of times, man, our family, they don't understand what we're doing. Hell, my grandmother and my mom still don't really know what I do with SDF. You know what it's saying? So it's kind of hard to show people that have worked traditional jobs and have traditional careers to kind of explain to them what we do in this documentary film field. And so really trying to navigate around that and trying to raise money, try to film, put together a crew. It was really tough at the beginning, man. But luckily, I was able to tap into some great young talent at the time. A cinematographer, Isaiah Dante Lee. And so like 3 of the guys that I worked with on Wilmington on Fire, actually, they work big time in Hollywood right now. Mm-hmm. Dante, who was my cinematographer at the time, he had just graduated high school. He wanted to get involved with the project. I think I put a call out on Craigslist. I wouldn't do this now, but back then Craigslist still was a little legit. And so I put a call on Craigslist. I didn't know where to go, man. I was living in Laurenberg. I said, hey, I'm going to put a call out on Craigslist. And so several people hit me back. Dante stood out. He said, man, I'll do this, man. Just pay me $100 a day and give me some lunch. We can do it. I said, all right, let's do it. And so also I got hit up with a composer, Matthew Head, who's like a top composer right now in Hollywood as well. He was, an indie hip hop R&B guy down in Atlanta, and he wanted to do something similar to what I was doing. He wanted to get more involved in film. He was doing hip hop and R&B stuff, but he said, man, I'm interested in doing some scoring for commercials and some documentaries, and I would love to be involved in this. And, I won't even really charge you that much because I'm trying to still learn myself. So we all pretty much were learning while doing this project. Every pretty much crew member that we had was it was like our first project in a sense. And so it built a good sense of camaraderie and also togetherness that, hey man, we needed to lean on each other. We're all good at certain things, but we all are kind of new at this as well. And so we all got to be there for each other and support each other and really make the best film possible. That process, man, we started filming. The very first thing we shot was the ending scene of Wilmington on Fire, where we had Larry Thomas reading the poem at the end of the film. That was the very first thing we shot. That was November 2011. And the last thing we shot was the summer of 2013. And then it took another year and a half to get some post-production funding and finish it up. And we premiered at the Cucalores Film Festival November 2015. So it was a long journey, man. Even that first year, I was pretty much homeless, man. That first year. So before moving to my grandparents' house in Laurenberg, I stayed in Charlotte for like 6 months because I had got a little job there in Charlotte after I got laid off. And so pretty much I'm staying in friends' houses, on couches and little, shady motels and stuff like that for like a good 6 months, man. And the money I was making from my job, it was nothing but like $10 an hour. I was using that to go film. You know what I'm saying?
I was going to ask, like, where did the money come to pay these guys if you were essentially like, just scraping by? Was it you were just redirecting your own?
Redirecting my own savings. Yeah, my own savings. The job where I was working at, that's why pretty much I was homeless, man. Because I just put everything I had to get this thing rolling, just to get the ball rolling. Because I felt like, if I can get the ball rolling, people can really see the vision. A lot of times it's hard, man. As you're a first-time filmmaker, you might have this great idea, but no one cares. If you don't have like a concept or a concept reel or something that they can see visually, you're wasting your time. And so I said, let me put everything I got into this thing just to get the ball rolling. But I think once I get the ball rolling, I know other people will come on board and want to support and help out. And that's what happened.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, one of the things I like to do is have, as much as you're comfortable with, like, degrees of transparency. Like, what did you have to do? How much time, how much money had you had to spend roughly to get something that you could then like get buy-in from other people? And what did that look like? Did it look like, okay, I have a few friends who are like, here's $500, like, as much as you feel comfortable sharing?
Oh yeah, I can share it all, man. So the very first thing we did, I heard of this concept called crowdfunding. It was kind of just coming on the scene at the time, and it sounded like a cool idea. So I said, let me do a crowdfunding campaign. I did Indiegogo, and I had like this before we shot anything, man. I was like, man, I know I can at least get like 5 or 10 grand. We'll be good to go. Man, I raised $200, on this campaign, and so I totally bombed at it. And I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and just start filming. So I put a couple of grand in. We started filming some stuff. Put together a little sizzle reel trailer type of thing. And then I went back to the drawing board. I said, you know what, let me reach out. Let me try to find an executive producer, someone that kind of can godfather me along in this process, because I don't know that much. This is kind of like my first film. I bombed the last one. I don't want to mess this one up. So let me find someone. So I reached out to this guy who's still a mentor to me today. His name's Pete Chapman. He directs a lot of big time TV shows now in Hollywood. But at the time, he had did 2 great indie films. One was called Premium. It was Zoe Saldana's first leading lady role as well. And then also he did a great documentary called The 761st. It's about the 761st Black Tank Battalion in World War II. And so I was a huge fan. And I just emailed him, man. I said, man, let me reach out, man. Because I don't think he was doing nothing. I ain't heard from him in a while. And I think he was teaching at NYU, teaching film. And so I emailed him. He emailed me back a week later. He said, man, I would love to talk to you. Let's talk. Let's chop it up. And so we talked. And I said, look, man, I'm just looking for an executive producer to be a part of this project. You won't have to do much. I might just send you some footage to check out here and there. But that's it, man. I'm just trying to have someone that's official, that's legit in the game to be a part of this. And I would love to learn from you as well. And he said, man, hey, let's do it. Next stage was another guy named Tariq Nasheed. He has a great documentary series called Hidden Colors. And he also has a new documentary, The History of Hip Hop in America as well. But his Hidden Colors series, man, broke records. It's pretty much one of the most successful independent Black history docuseries ever. And so I reached out to him because I was a fan of his podcast. I reached out and said, hey, man, I'm doing this. Would you want to be a producer on this? And he wanted to get involved. I think he gave me like $5,000 to get it going, to get some stuff going, man. And so he believed in it. And then also he would promote Wilmington on Fire on his podcast. And so we were able to attract a lot of his audience from the Hidden Colors series to come to what we were doing as well. And so it was on, man. And then so I did another campaign since I had Pete, since I had Tariq's following, and we ended up raising, another $5,000, and successfully raising it on Kickstarter this time. And then we were able to shoot everything, get everything shot, even though, $10,000 isn't a lot of money. It was bare bones, man. We just did what we had to do. But I forgot that I needed money for post-production. And so I tried to go back to the well again to do another crowdfunding campaign to try to raise $15,000. Didn't get it. I think we raised about $8,000. So we, barely kind of reached a little over half, but we didn't get the money because, with Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. And this is before Seed and Spark came out and stuff like that. We had the different options. And so I was stuck, man. But while being stuck and not knowing how to finish post-production, I say, you know what, I'm continue to promote, and no one knows that I don't have any money to finish. Let's just keep hyping it up. Let's just keep hyping it up, man. Like we're about to come out with something. Let's drop some clips, a new trailer here and there. Let's keep promoting this, because you never know who's going to hear it, and it happened. So a former NBA player, David West, he was playing in the NBA at the time, but he's retired now. He actually heard about the film through an article by Mark Anthony Neal, who's an African-American studies professor at Duke University, wrote about what we were doing. And they reached out to Mark. He said, man, what's this film about, man? This looks interesting. I would love to get involved. And so Mark hits me up, and he didn't have to do this, man. I always tell him all the time, man, I really appreciate you doing that, because sometimes, man, you get people, they'll tell someone to do something, they won't do it. They say, man, I ain't helping him. He's going to have to do it himself. But Mark relayed the message and then connected me with him, and the rest is history. And so I didn't believe it at first, because I'm like, man, I'm this guy from Little Laurinburg. I know this guy that's in the NBA, who's an NBA Hall of Famer. I know he's not paying attention to what I'm doing. And so it was me going back and forth with his business manager for like 6 months, because I didn't believe it. He said, look, man, David, they're coming to Charlotte in a couple of weeks. We're going to get you a ticket. Nice seats. You're going to chop it up with me. Then I'm going to introduce you to David after the game. I said, all right, cool. So I go to Charlotte, nervous, man, and, get me a hotel room. I said, I cannot mess this up. And so I went to the games, my first time going to a professional game as well, chopped it up, had a great conversation with his manager. Then he introduces me to David afterwards, man. We had a great convo. He loved what I was doing. He's into Black history, and found out he was from North Carolina. He's from Garner, North Carolina as well. And didn't know none of that stuff, man, and found out a lot about him, and his passion and interest is about Black history and Black culture. And he said, man, you're pretty much done. I'm going to give you the 15 grand to help you finish this up. And so that's how it happened, man. Really is just promoting like I didn't need any help, but I did. But it eventually caught wind of some folks.
Wow. That is such a wild, and it's a story that really resonates with me, because it does I feel like, especially as directors of projects, like we have such a fine line to balance between, you don't want to come off as desperate, right? When you're in, like, if you're months in and you're sunk into the cost, especially with a first project or anything that you're very personally, passionate about. But there is a fine line of, you have to maintain a positive morale, at least for what people see on the outside. Like, you have to keep things going. And it seems like the moral of the story, as you're saying now in recollection, is simply that. Like, we were kind of drowning. Like, we're kind of in over our heads. You kind of started in over your heads, but I mean, hey, that's how anything great happens, right? And then even at that point when things seem like, I don't know how this is going to happen, to just basically continue to be hopeful and optimistic and project success, even if that success is actually still like yet to be seen. And I love that worked out for you so much. I love that. I feel very similar.
The reason why I did that, just to keep promoting and to keep positive, is what I saw a lot of hip hop artists do over the years. So I would see a hip hop artist, they would go on a radio show and promote a new single. And they say, the album's coming out in like 2 months. And then 2 months comes, it never comes out. Then they'll come back on another radio show, promote another single, and say, hey, we had some clearance issues, but it's all good now, and the album's coming out next quarter. And they're constantly promoting, even though the film hasn't came out. The album hasn't came out. So I said, you know what? I can apply that same type of thing to what I'm doing until I get the money together. Let's continue to promote, build audience, and also build anticipation as well. And so when that anticipation really built, and we said, hey, we're finished up post-production. We got the okay from Cucaloris to premiere there. And then it was crazy, man, with that premiere, because I think we had like a line of people that kind of wrapped around the block of Thalian Hall that couldn't get in. And then also it sold out. I think we still have their record for the most attended screening ever in Cucaloris history. That was going on close to 10 years now. And it was crazy, man. But it's building that anticipation over those years. They really built it up, and also making those connections with Pete Chapman, Tariq Nasheed, and others to help as well to build that anticipation.
So if I put on like my philosopher hat and try to look at the big picture here, first you made a team, which was like all the folks that you were working with at the beginning who were just like you, of like, we have ambitious goals, we have passions, we're still learning, right? And so you had this team which created like a small community around this project. And then to just get the thing out, you essentially had to build a movement to then ultimately make the film a success. And so, which, I think that is beautiful. And I feel like that is truly the only way around that catch-22 of like, how does an indie doc maker, like how, or someone who wants to become an indie filmmaker, like how do they do it? Because it is a catch-22, right? It's like, unless you have a big pile of cash sitting around to get started, it's really hard, right? You essentially have to create hype out of nothing. I love that it was successful for you. I really appreciate you sharing how difficult that was.
Oh yeah, and then it didn't stop there, man. Even after the screening of the debut of Wilmington on Fire, what the beauty of it was that a lot of times with film festivals, festivals invite important people. You invite the mayor and city council people. With Wilmington on Fire, man, that didn't matter. You couldn't get in. It was totally completely sold out. So you had a lot of those top folks that can usually get in to this festival. They couldn't get in, and we're kind of upset. And I know one lady at the time, she's not there anymore, but she ran the UNCW Arts at Keenan Auditorium at the time. And she was one of those folks. She was able to get into the second screening. So they did a second rush screening the next day at Django's Playhouse. And I think the tickets, as soon as they went on sale, I think in 10 minutes, it just sold out. Dang. And so she was able to get in that. And I met her the next day and she said, "Hey, Chris, I would love to do a screening like this at our school." And I said, "Well, let's talk." And so this hasn't worked since. But what I did was I negotiated a deal with her. I said, "Okay, peep this out. We'll do a free screening for all the UNCW campus. So anybody that wants to come, it could be a student, faculty member, whoever. They can work in the cafeteria. It don't matter. As long as you work or you go to school at UNCW, we got 1,000-seater here. You can come in for free and check out the film and also experience the Q&A. But I'll do this for free in return that you let me get the same venue for an evening showing and I get to keep the box." And she said, "All right, let's do it." So signed off on it, and we end up having a great screening for the whole entire school and staff. And then we had like a 800 folk turnout for the evening screening, man. And so also, I made some decent money over that first couple of years as well, just doing screenings, man. And so I just took it all over North Carolina, went to Durham with it, sold out the Hayti Heritage Center, went to Goldsboro, sold out the Paramount Theater, went to Chapel Hill, went to Asheville, went all over North Carolina, and then also several parts of the country as well, doing film festivals and also our own screenings as well. And it just kind of just blew up from there.
Do you feel comfortable sharing any of the like figures that you were able to make for some of these events, just to give folks like some frame of reference?
Well, I can tell you right now, man, total, we still make money on the film to this day. So total over the past, going on, it's 9 years now, was like last week made 9 years when we debuted at Cucalores. But up until this day, man, we've made over 250,000 over 9 years. And so those first couple of screenings, like I told you, we premiered at Cucalores. We didn't make any money from that. But I saw that all this money was coming in. I said, you know what, let me rent this venue. So before...
That's crazy, actually. Hold up. I want to pause on that. So Cucalores didn't split any of the sold-out show?
Nah. But, that's how it works, man, with these festivals. But now, I have better negotiating power. So, honestly, now with Wilmington on Fire 2, I don't have to do a festival, man, especially in Wilmington. I can just rent out any joint because I have the Wilson Center. They're ready. They say, "Man, we'll give you the spot." That's like a 1,500 seater for Wilmington on Fire too. So now I have some real deal negotiating power to do some things on my own terms. But at the time, it was my first time, and I didn't know anything about this business side of it. It's just like when making a film. You make mistakes and you learn from them. And so even with distribution and self-distribution, you learn as well while you're doing it too. And that's the way you learn as well, by doing it. And so I said, you know what? They just made all this money with this screening here at Thalian Hall. Let me rent Thalian Hall the next month. And so I did. So I took like $1,000, flipped it, rented Thalian Hall, man. We packed out I think we had about 400 people that came out to that second screening the following month. And so I used this in some of my webinars, man. So I still got the check stub of that screening.
Nice.
After everything's said and done, man, I made a little over 7,000. They gave me the check. And so I like to have that on the screen to show people that it's real, because some people can just make up numbers, but I want to show you the check stubs, man, to show you that it really happened. And you see on the thing, it says Wilmington on Fire ticket sales, Thalian Hall writing the check for $7,000, man. And that was my very first screening the month after Cucaloris. And then the month after that, after we rented Thalian, we did UNCW and I made another $7,000. And so in like 2 months, I made like 14 grand, man. The most money I ever seen in my life in just like a 2-month period of just screening my film. And so those first 3 months, so those first 3 to 4 months, man, we were pulling in like $4 to $7,000 a screening, and then also, selling T-shirts, posters. A lot of times the T-shirts and posters would just cover the venue. And tickets would just be straight profit, man. It was crazy. And so what I did was just, reinvested in the film. And also I wanted to do, the martial arts project. And so I started using some of that money to get the Grandmaster martial arts project going as well.
Okay, I want to zoom us out a little bit because I feel like we've covered some really interesting things. I appreciate how much you're sharing too about just like your honest experience, because I think that's super helpful. I agree. Just kind of what you were saying about like people will give like talks and they'll just like, it sounds like they're just making up numbers, and they never actually like provide any receipts, right? Or like any evidence of it. In the same vein, I feel like the issue with a lot of the like advice for indie filmmakers is there's just a lot of either BS or just sort of like, it's really vague, it'll be like, just work really hard and just apply it to all the big festivals. And then, it's all kinds of like made up stuff that literally never happens to anybody. So since this is a podcast for a broader audience, it's for filmmakers, but it's for all kinds of creatives. Could you just give us like really, really simple, like basics? What is the life of an indie doc filmmaker? Obviously you can only speak really from your experience, but also as the artistic director of the SDF, which I want to talk to you about a little bit. What is the job like? Is it a job for a lot of people, or is it more of a vocation, more of a hobby? This is one of the things in this industry. Talk to us about what's the lay of the land 2024, the life of an indie doc filmmaker.
Oh, man, it's crazy, man. It's changed over the years. I'll go into me first, and then for, folks that I talk to all the time, just being an artistic director, I say for me, it's a little half and half. I have a full-time job as artistic director, which is documentary work in a way. It's pretty much doc admin type of work. But as a doc filmmaker and producer, it really is more of a hobby to me. It's more of a part-time job for me at the time. My full-time job takes a lot of my time, and then my documentary work is more of a part-time thing. You know what I'm saying? So even with Wilmington on Fire, it's 9 years old, but we still do a lot of stuff with it. So we do a lot of licensing still. So the film still makes money on its own, even while asleep. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a self-running thing. And so now we're just trying to gear up for Wilmington on Fire 2 to come out next year, and also Grandmaster as well. And so now, even though I'm doing stuff part-time, eventually it's about to come full-time. So it's like I'm going to have 2 full-time jobs in a sense. Yeah. So that's how it kind of works for me at the moment. My job is strictly, how I make majority of my money, even though we do make money from licensing and speaking engagements for Wilmington on Fire. It still doesn't, make up the difference, what I really make from a 9 to 5. So, until then, I got to continue to work the 9 to 5, but still, I still make time to do my artistic stuff and do my documentaries. And also it helps my job as well to still stay in the lane and still stay in the landscape. It only helps, what I do with SDF as well. But outside of myself, I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff, man, where, folks are doing other things to supplement their income. You have a lot of talented makers out here. And so while they're making their documentaries, they're doing like branded content work, commercial work, stuff like that with brands or organizations, corporations and stuff like that. You have a lot of folks that are teaching as well. That kind of helps them, whether it's to get some students to help them out with some projects and just to still stay in it and kind of give back in a sense as well of teaching, up and coming filmmakers and documentarians. So you kind of see a little mixture of that type of thing. People that are still working 9 to 5s, people are teaching. If they're not working a 9 to 5, they're still using their camera, but it's usually to do branded content work, stuff with organizations, corporations, commercial work, stuff like that. Then you have some people that, just do straight commission, work. They're lucky to be those hand-selected few that are getting some good commission work out there. But a lot of, even some of those top people are saying that, a lot of documentaries aren't getting bought like they were, 5 to 10 years ago, when we had this huge influx of docs and every distributor wanted to produce or distribute documentaries. It's kind of dried up now, and so it's really only a handful like true crime or has to be celebrity focus based and stuff like that. And so a lot of people now are going towards more independent routes and outlets. So people hit me up all the time, man, and say, hey, Chris, I would love to learn from you and how you did your thing independently and how you do it independently. And so I kind of, the thing is with being an independent filmmaker and just doing your own independent distribution, I used to get clowned all the time when I distributed Wilmington on Fire. But I'm like, I just made 20 grand in 3 months off of just doing my own screenings, man. Can you say that? I was seeing people getting distribution deals, man. In 3 years, they still haven't seen a single dime yet. And it's like I can count every penny. I know where every penny's going. I can go right to my audience, and I can always make some money. And I'm making some real deal money as well. And people just couldn't fathom that. But now you're starting to see people really embrace that now and seeing that that's the only way to continue to do this is you're going to have some type of independent distribution plan, period.
I want to go slightly into that just a little bit more because I feel like this is at the heart of where documentary is such an unfriendly industry right now for independent makers because it comes up all the time. I'm sure you hear this a lot too, especially for folks who are not in the field of like, how are you going to distribute Gen X? How are you going to distribute, this project, that project? What are your plans? And it's just, my brain kind of implodes when I'm asked that question because I'm like, how many details do I share about how like just broken this field is, right? About how the fact is if you get a distributor, most of the time, you're not earning any kind of money from that. If you are earning money, it's peanuts. It's never even coming close to the actual budget of a project, let alone then you're like trusting that that distributor is spending any amount of time or resources to actually get your project in front of an audience. And this is all like a unicorn scenario. So I think the ways in which you have been creative with just taking control of your own distribution, your own release is exactly the way to make it in documentary in this day and age. I mean, I can say that for our short film Burned that came out like a year and a half ago, 2 years almost, we still had this like idealistic dream of we'll get a big distributor because it's such an important story. We have so much buy-in from, literally the entire firefighting community. It should be a shoo-in. And I think I've told you about this. I even had like basically one of the most well-respected documentary distribution partners, like a direct line to the executive at that organization through a friend at SDF, funny enough. And I basically learned that like even that really big distributor, who I will not name, doesn't support documentaries anymore that make companies look bad. And I was like, oh my God, that's how bad this ecosystem is, that the big distributors, not only are they not going to pay you, but essentially they're protecting corporations. And so for me as a storyteller trying to reveal a lot of times corporations doing bad, it was a little heartbreaking. And then I was like, well, we can do something like what Chris did. We can just make our own thing. We have an audience. We have a great film. We have a way to release it. For us, it was similar to the Wilmington on Fire, just like having a big premiere, way bigger than we expected. And for us, that was enough of a catalyst. That is a 30-minute film, and we've made more than 6 figures on it. And I was told in the field of documentary, it's impossible to make a return on a short film, let alone to make profit. And I think it was a unique situation, but I just wanted to add to that like, it feels like the only way to survive in this ecosystem is essentially like tapping into existing community interests, right? Like I'm interested in the story, or I'm interested in a movement, and just like meeting audiences. Essentially it's like getting rid of the middlemen, right? Like these distributors are the middlemen. It's, it's the thing that makes all business or any part of society a problem. Is like people in the middle who just are trying to take a bigger and bigger cut.
And it's crazy, right? Because I've done screenings because I like to curate screening experiences as well, even outside my job. And I know it was one film. It was called I Called Him Morgan. It's a jazz documentary, and the distributor of that, man, kind of dropped the ball because. So the film has a good friend of mine. He passed away last year, Larry Thomas, who was in Wilmington on Fire. He's also a jazz historian as well. And so he was in this documentary, I Called Him Morgan. The film's about Helen Morgan. She was married to, jazz legend Lee Morgan, who's a legendary jazz trumpeter, and she killed him as well. And so it was about that whole experience. And so Larry actually recorded, he had the only audio recording of her being interviewed ever. And so they used his audio recording to kind of narrate the story throughout the film. And so Helen Morgan's from Wilmington, and they never did a Wilmington screening at all, period, during the whole time. And so I said, Larry, man, let me just do it. I'll get the license. Let's do a big screening in Wilmington. You're from here. She's from here. Yeah. We'll invite people that went to her church and other people that knew her, and we'll have a Q&A with you afterwards. And he's like, man, let's do it. And we had a sold out screening and everything of this thing. And the distributor never even thought to even do a screening here where the ladies, your two main characters are from. Wow. Even with the, we've done screenings with the Wu-Tang Clan with their recent documentary of Wu-Tang experience. Even with that distributor, they haven't really done anything. They haven't done any promotion for it. We've done more promotion for the Wu-Tang film and got more press and everything for them than the distributor has. And so a lot of time, man, these distributors, they don't care. Even if they have a big name property attached, they still don't care. A lot of times, man, they're building up their catalog because I've seen this happen with distributors. They'll just pick up a whole bunch of film for distribution so they can get sold. Yep. And so when a company buys them, it looks like they have this huge catalog, which they do. And so a lot of times that's what they're doing, man. They're just building catalogs so they can sell it to another, to the highest bidder.
Right. Wow. We've provided a lot of examples of like ways in which you were creative in order to basically make your projects come to life and to be successful. Do you have some more specific advice that you would want to offer to other either indie filmmakers or potential indie filmmakers, folks who are considering getting involved in documentary? What are some practical tips for them to be successful? Things you wish you knew?
I would have started off with maybe one or two shorts before tackling a feature. I really have started to learn to embrace short filmmaking a little bit more now since working at SDF. I think for years I felt like, if it's a short, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. You can't monetize. I know you've heard the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yep. But you can monetize short documentaries. Honestly, I think you might can monetize them a little bit better because especially when people really want to, with documentary, they don't really care for the film that much. They care for the dialogue that comes afterwards. They care for the Q&A, the experience to dialogue with the subjects, with the maker and other people that are in that room. And so when you have a short, you have more space for that. If you have a 30-minute short, you're not feeling drained as well after the screening. You got a 20, 30-minute short, 20, 30-minute Q&A, and then you go home. You spend like an hour. I can deal with that instead of like a 2-hour film and a 30-minute Q&A. It's like you're drained, you know what I'm saying? And so sometimes shorter can be better. And so I think doing a couple of shorts first, I wish I would have done that just to make those mistakes early on, learn from those mistakes, kind of find my own cinematic language and style as well. And just to kind of figure out some things, it just will help you be just an overall tighter filmmaker as well, just doing one or two shorts. Now, you don't have to just do just shorts your whole life. Definitely try to tackle a feature if the story warrants that, but really embrace short filmmaking and use it not only as a learning tool, but you can also use it as a way to build your audience as well and make you a few dollars, if the story fits and you know how to flip it. Then also just learning how to build an audience as well, whether you're doing a short documentary or feature or series, learn how to build your audience, create some social media presence, start an email list, all those things, to just build audience and build what you're doing, because that audience, those are the ones that are going to buy the streaming when it's on Amazon, buy the DVDs, the merchandise. They're going to come to the screenings, and they're going to be the ones that's going to share it to the world and get other people to pay attention to what you're doing. So start early of building an audience early on, and that's going to grow. You might start off with maybe 20 emails on your email list, but keep plugging away at it. And, in about 5 years, you might have 5,000 up there. And so you're really working with something. The two things, man, is really starting building an audience early and really embrace short filmmaking, kind of use it as a way to learn from your mistakes and also figure out your own cinematic style and language and directing style as well. And that also helps you kind of figure out who you really want to crew with. Because a lot of times, man, we're going to crew with some of the same people. We're going to film with people we're comfortable with and that we trust, and vice versa. And so that also helps you kind of test out some crew folks to see, okay, who will be best suited to kind of go forward, with me, maybe doing this feature length project as well. And so I think those are some of the things, man. And also really embrace making money and monetizing your projects as well. Because a lot of times, man, we get shamed, and I hear it all the time. Especially with documentary makers, we always get shamed of, if you make $1 from your project, man, you're somehow robbing the community. And we got to kind of change that mentality. We have to make money so we can make more films. And 100%. To also promote our films as well, because we don't have huge marketing dollars like some of these bigger studios, man. So we got to make some money, to put back into the project and to also pay people and to continue to make more films. If you like what we're doing, support it.
Wow. You basically just explained why documentary is so special, and it's 100%. You hit the nail on the head of why I personally love documentary so much. We end every segment with basically an opportunity for you to share something with the listeners about how you hold on hope for the future. What is something about the future that excites you or gives you hope?
Well, I think, man, just what excites me is that the access to technology to make these films and to do what we're doing. I think we're going to start seeing more, especially younger filmmakers, really embrace the whole independent model more than anything. I think it's it's going to go back to how like the indie rock scene was at one time, or the indie hip hop scene at one time. I think that's what I'm looking forward to do, is to see some cool independent projects, independent distribution, different ways of doing screenings and events, making them interactive and fun, because it's so hard to get people out the house now, man. We got all this streaming service. I'm even seeing it even with festivals, man. Festival sales have gone down over the past few years. And so just seeing more, interactive components of film and the film experience I think that's what I'm looking forward to in the future, and just seeing what some of these young filmmakers come up with, because they have all this access to technology now. They're learning at a young age, how to edit and do all this stuff. So I know it's really going to translate into some cool stuff. And so that's what I'm looking forward towards, man, is just seeing more filmmakers really embrace independent filmmaking across the board, and also independent distribution as well, and how we engage with our audience.
I love that. And you're reminding me, I want to go back to where, just as you said, like we're in a media dominated age, or like saturated like ecosystem. That's just where we're at. Like there's too much stuff to watch. There's not enough time. And it's increasingly hard to like get rid of the noise and actually like pick a good thing. And I think this is, to me, why I'm so drawn to documentary, why I got into it in the first place. You were talking about this earlier, which is it's ultimately less about like what the film is. It's about the experience of going out to a space with other people and just like having a chance to engage in dialogue, having a chance to like actually interact with people, which is like, that's a unique thing of documentary and of nonfiction, is like, everything's made by people, but like with documentary, it's like, oh, that's the actual person that did it, or that's the actual person that I just like witnessed their story, and I can actually reach out and like ask them a question. It's that connection that I feel like is what is so special. It's what motivates me, honestly, to do the work, is it's that personal and that human connection. And I don't think that's something that a streaming service can ever actually compete with. So I love that you basically pointed that out.
We do kind of like an interactive movie experience where we do like live film scoring to a film. And so we're actually exploring that. So these guys I work with out of DC, they're called Shaolin Jazz. And we do like a lot of those type of events where we'll like remix the score to Kill Bill. We did The Crow before, a whole bunch of stuff. And so they're interested in doing some stuff with my documentaries. So they want to kind of do a live scoring component to like Wilmington on Fire 2 and Grandmaster when those are done. And so we're going to do some of those type of things as well, man, just creating some cool, unique experiences and thinking outside the box. Because like you said, it's just hard to get people out the house now, just to compete against the Netflixes and all that. But if you're bringing something different to the table, a lot of times people will come out the house for that as well. Then, you can get sponsors to donate certain things as well. We have some good relationships with a lot of breweries where we can always get free beer and cool things to give out for free. And, really to, entice people to come out and hang out with us.
Yep, exactly. Natural segue. So we've covered so much. Just for time purposes, I think, Chris, at some point it's going to make sense to bring you back in because I would like to come back into this conversation around film festivals. I would like to talk more about how the creating experiences for people is sort of like the nouveau generation that like art, especially documentary, is moving into. I do think that's a growing space. I think that's a really important space. But for the purposes of this episode, I think we're going to wrap it there. That brings this story to a close. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we would love your input. If you have an idea, like a future guest or a new segment, send us a message, podcast@etherealfilms.org, or you can leave us a comment on the Substack. The show is made to help other creatives just like myself, so if you want to support us, tell another friend to start listening. It really makes a difference. Real Perspective is produced in Hillsborough, North Carolina at Ethereal Films. Episodes are co-produced by Ava Richardson-Dodd, and Sammy Bauer is our head of cat wrangling. I'm Eli. And that was A Real Perspective.